Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello! My name is Caroline and I make sewing tutorials and sewing patterns to help you along the sewing journey. And today's video is another pattern making tutorial. I'll be showing you how to make a basic skirt block using your own body measurements. First, I'll show you how to properly take your body measurements, and then I'll show you how to draft the basic skirt pattern. I already have two other basic block tutorials on my channel, a basic bodice tutorial with darts and a basic sleeve block. I'll link both these videos in the description. And I plan on remaking my basic bodice block pattern making tutorial very soon because I have slightly upgraded the way that I make them. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and turn the notifications on so you don't miss it. And if you'd like for me to make a video on the basic pants block tutorial as well, please let me know in the comments. So what are these basic blocks for? The basic blocks for the skirt, the bodice, the sleeves, and the pants are like starter patterns that we use as a foundation when we're designing our clothes. They are made to match our body's measurements and don't include any design details. If we sew these blocks together, we will get a very simple garment that's all about the fit. And having these basic blocks make our lives way easier when we want to create another design. Instead of starting from scratch every single time, we can just grab the base pattern that we know fits well and make small changes to turn it into a dress, a shirt, or whatever else we want. I have a lot of videos here on my channel where I take the basic bodice block and I transform it into a different design. I'll leave a playlist in the description that has all of my pattern making videos if you're interested in that. But now let's learn how to take our body measurements. First, we need to measure our waist circumference. If you want, you can also use a cord so the measurements are more precise. For most of us, it will be the smallest measurement of our body. Then we need to measure our full hip circumference. That will be the widest part of our hips. Then we need to measure the hip height, which is the vertical distance between our waist and the widest part of our hips. And then we need to measure the length of the skirt, which is from our waist to where you want your skirt to hit. We'll draft half of the front and half of the back, so we don't actually need the full circumference measurement that we got. So take a calculator and divide the waist circumference by 4 and also divide the hip circumference by 4. These will be our waist and hips measurement for now. And we also need to calculate the measurements for the darts. The dart size and length can change depending on your body shape. For the length of the dart, we'll use our hip height measurement as a guide to determine it. If your hip height is from 20 to 25 centimeters, then your dart should be 13 centimeters long. And if your hip height is from 25 to 30 centimeters, then your dart should be 15 centimeters long. And for the width of the dart, which is what we call the dart intake, you will need to calculate your full hip circumference. So the measurement that we got on our body, not the one that we divided by 4, the original one. So your full hip circumference minus your full waist circumference. And the result that you got, you can compare it to this table right here. You can pause to read if you want, but basically if you have wider hips and a smaller waist, then your darts will need to be bigger. We'll start with the front. From A to B, you measure the full length of the skirt. From A to C, you measure the hip height. From A, you square a line to the side. If you don't have a ruler with a 90-degree angle, you can use a book instead. Here you measure your waist plus 0.25 centimeters for ease. From C, you also square a line to the side. And you measure your hips plus 1 centimeter for ease. This will be point E. And our point F will have the same distance from C to E. Now we'll measure the middle of A to D. This will be our front dart placement. I'll square it down and measure my dart length, which in my case is 13 centimeters. This will be point G. Then I'll measure half of the front dart intake to each side and connect it to G. Here at the center front, I'll lower 1 centimeter and I'll also add the total front dart intake to point D. Now we'll connect the points using a curved ruler when it's necessary, and then through the darts. I'll measure both sides to make sure they're the same length, and I'll add the corresponding length to the smaller one so both darts have the same size. And before cutting the paper, I'll fold the dart so it has the proper shape. Now for the back, the base is the same as the front. The only difference is that the dart intake for the back is bigger than the front. So we measure the back dart intake to each side and connect it to point G. Then we add the back dart intake to the waist like we did for the front. And lower 1.5 centimeters at the center back. And connect the points using a curve when it's necessary. And then through the darts following the same principles from the front. And this dart placement won't be perfect for every single body out there, so you can adjust it according to your body shape. If you're flatter at the back, you might not even need a dart intake, for example. And if you have really wide hips, but the volume of your hips is concentrated only at the back part, you can take part of the front dart intake and add it to the back to make them wider. And if that's the case, if your back dart is very wide, you can also divide it into 2 separate darts. That will make it look smoother when we sew and when it's on your body. But to use this block alongside the basic bodice block to make dresses without a waist seam, for example, I personally prefer to leave just 1 dart instead of 2. It just makes things easier when I'm transferring the darts or trying to match the bodice to the skirt. After I was done, I transferred the pattern to a stiffer piece of paper, and I also transferred the guidelines like the hip line and the darts. This block has a total of 4 centimeters of ease around your body for wearing comfort, but it doesn't have seam allowance. When you're using it to create another design, you need to add seam allowance to every seam that you plan on sewing to another panel. If you want to make a muslin of a skirt just to test the fit, you can add seam allowance only to the side seam or also to the center back seam if that's where you plan on adding a zipper. But if you want to sew the skirt to a bodice or finish the waistline with a facing, for example, you also need to add seam allowance to the waist and hem allowance to the hem. Every time I use a basic block to create another design, I always mention where I add a seam allowance, so you don't have to worry about that. But basically, you'll always need to add seam allowance where you have a seam. And I personally like to use 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch for my seam allowances. Overall, the skirt block is very simple to make. I hope you're able to understand all of the steps. And if you have any questions, please let me know down below. If this video was helpful to you, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I hope to see you around next time as well. Bye!